Daddy, please help her. The little voice cut through the heavy autumn air, sharper than the smell of funnel cake and diesel fumes. Lucas froze. He looked down at his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, who was tugging violently at the sleeve of his flannel shirt. Her eyes weren't on the Ferris wheel or the prize she had just won. They were locked on a scene unfolding near the exit of the fairgrounds. 30 yards away, 2 large security guards were dragging a woman across the gravel. She was fighting them with the desperation of a trapped animal, her heels digging into the dirt, her dress torn at the shoulder. She was screaming, a guttural, terrifying sound that didn't sound like English. "Let's go, folks. Nothing to see here," one guard shouted to the crowd, waving his free hand dismissively. "Just another one who had too much to drink. Show's over." The crowd at the Harvest Festival did exactly what crowds always do. They stared. They judged. A few teenagers raised their phones to record the humiliation, laughing as the woman slipped in the mud. To them, she was just a crazy lady, a nuisance ruining their Friday night. But Lucas didn't see a drunk. He saw the mud on her knees, fresh, dark mud from the creek, not the dry dust of the fairground. He saw the scratches on her arms, consistent with briars, not a bar fight. And then, he heard the words she was screaming. "Pelo amor de Deus, minha filha. Ele levou minha filha." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. The crowd heard gibberish. Lucas heard a nightmare. She said, "For God's sake, my daughter! He took my daughter!" Lucas handed his popcorn to Lily and stepped over the yellow caution tape. He was 30 years old, a local carpenter with hands roughened by work and a reputation in this town that meant something. He wasn't a big talker, but when he moved, people tended to move out of his way. "Hey, back off, buddy," the lead guard barked as Lucas approached. The guard, a man named Miller who enjoyed his badge a little too much, tightened his grip on the woman's arm. "We got this under control. She's trespassing and disturbing the peace." The woman looked up at Lucas. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a terror so raw it made his stomach turn. She was young, maybe late 20s, and clearly not from around here. "Señor, por favor," she gasped, reaching out a trembling hand toward him. "A policia. Shame ya, policia." "She's speaking in tongues, man," Miller scoffed. "Probably high on something. We're tossing her out the back gate so she can sleep it off in the woods." "Let her go," Lucas said. His voice was low, calm, but it carried a steel edge that made Miller pause. "Excuse me?" "I said let her go. She's not drunk, Miller. She's begging you to call the police." Miller laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You speak crazy now, Lucas?" "No," Lucas said, his eyes never leaving the woman's face. "I speak Portuguese. My wife, my late wife, was Brazilian. I know exactly what this woman is saying." Lucas knelt down, ignoring the mud soaking into his jeans. He looked the woman in the eye and spoke the first Portuguese words he had spoken in 3 years, since the day his wife died. "Calma. Eu entendo você. O que aconteceu?" "Calm down. I understand you. What happened?" The woman collapsed forward, grabbing Lucas's shirt with both hands, sobbing. "Ele pegou ela! Homem grande, a big man, tatuagem de cobra. Ele arrastou ela para o mato. Minha Elara, ela só tem 6 anos. 6 years. Lucas stood up slowly. The festive lights of the carnival seemed to dim around him. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He looked at Miller, and for the first time, the security guard looked uneasy. "She says a man took her daughter," Lucas translated, his voice ringing out so the gawking crowd could hear. "A big man, snake tattoo on his neck. He dragged a 6-year-old girl into the woods behind the fairgrounds." A murmur went through the crowd. The phones went down. The laughter stopped. "She's lying," Miller stammered, though he looked less sure now. "We didn't see a kid. She came running out of the trees screaming like a banshee. She's hallucinating." "She has mud from the creek bed on her shins," Lucas pointed out, pointing to her legs. "The creek is a mile past the fence line. She didn't get that here. And look at her dress. That's a tear from a barbed wire fence. She didn't wander in here to party, Miller. She clawed her way in here to get help." Lucas turned to the crowd, locking eyes with a few men he knew from the hardware store. "Call the sheriff. Now. Tell him we have a code at him, but it's worse. Tell him the suspect is already off the grounds." The atmosphere shifted instantly. The indifference of the mob turned into panic. Parents pulled their children closer. A woman dialed 911. Miller, realizing his mistake, finally let go of the sobbing mother, who fell to her knees, burying her face in her hands. Lucas checked his watch. 5:45 p.m. The sun was already dipping below the tree line of the massive state forest that bordered the town. He looked at the dense wall of pine and oak trees. To most people, that forest was just scenery or a place to dump trash. But to Lucas, it was a map. Before he was a carpenter and before he was a father, Lucas had spent his 20s as a hunter and a guide in these very mountains. He knew the terrain. He knew the hidden trails. And he knew the predators. He walked over to the woman. Her name was Sofia, she managed to whisper, and helped her stand. He took off his heavy flannel jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering her torn dress. It was a small act, but it gave her back a shred of dignity. "The police are coming," Miller said, trying to regain authority. "They said sit tight. A cruiser is 20 minutes out." 20 minutes? Lucas repeated. He looked at the sky. "In 20 minutes it'll be dusk. In an hour it'll be pitch black." "Miller, do you know the statistics?" "What?" "The first 3 hours," Lucas said, his voice hard. "We have 3 hours. That is the timeline. After 3 hours, the chances of finding an abducted child alive don't just go down. They plummet to almost zero. The trail goes cold, the scent vanishes, and the predator—" Lucas didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "We wait for the cops," Miller insisted. "That's protocol." "Protocol is for filling out paperwork," Lucas snapped. "That little girl doesn't have time for paperwork." He turned and scanned the crowd until he saw a familiar face. Mrs. Higgins, his daughter's favorite teacher, and a woman who had babysat Lily 100 times, was standing near the cotton candy stand, looking horrified. "Mrs. Higgins!" Lucas called out. She rushed over immediately. "Lucas! My God, is it true?" "Take Lily," Lucas said, gently pushing his daughter toward the older woman. "Take her to your house. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me." Lily looked up at her father. She saw the change in his eyes. The soft, playful dad who had just bought her popcorn was gone. In his place was the man who used to track elk through 3 feet of snow. She didn't cry. She didn't beg him to stay. She squeezed his hand one last time. "Go, Daddy," Lily whispered, brave beyond her 7 years. "Help her. Find the girl." Lucas nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He kissed Lily's forehead, then turned back to Sofia. She was shivering, not just from the cold, but from the shock. "Você consegue correr?" Lucas asked her in Portuguese. "Can you run?" Sofia looked at him, surprised that he was asking her, not telling her to stay put. She wiped the mud from her face and nodded fiercely. "Eu corro até o fim do mundo pela minha filha." "I will run to the end of the world for my daughter." "Good," Lucas said in English. "Because we aren't waiting for the sheriff." He walked to his pickup truck parked near the vendor entrance. He didn't grab a gun, he didn't have his permit on him, and didn't want to waste time explaining it to the cops later. Instead, he grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight, a coil of yellow tow rope, and a hunting knife he kept in the glove box for cutting drywall. "Lucas!" Miller shouted, stepping in front of the truck. "You can't go out there! You'll mess up the crime scene! The sheriff said to wait!" Lucas stepped close to Miller, invading his space. "You see those clouds, Miller? A storm is coming tonight. That rain will wash away every footprint in 60 minutes. If I wait for the sheriff to get a warrant and a K9 unit, that girl is gone forever. Now, get out of my way." Miller hesitated, looked at the determined set of Lucas's jaw, and stepped aside. Lucas looked at Sofia. "Let's go." She nodded. Then he said, "So you seem to understand English to some extent. You just don't know how to speak it properly, right?" She replied, "Yes." "Right, that will help a lot." They didn't take the truck. The truck couldn't go where they were going. They hopped the fence and sprinted across the open field toward the dark, imposing wall of the forest. As they hit the tree line, the sounds of the carnival, the calliope music, the laughter, the distant siren of the approaching police car, faded away. It was replaced by the silence of the woods. The transition was jarring. 1 minute, they were surrounded by neon lights. The next, they were swallowed by the ancient darkness of the forest. The deeper they went, the more the trees seemed to close ranks, blocking out the last gray light of the afternoon. Lucas slowed down, his eyes scanning the ground with the intensity of a machine. He wasn't just looking. He was reading the story written in the dirt. "Stay exactly on my path," Lucas whispered. "Don't step on soft ground." He stopped at a fork in the deer trail. To the untrained eye, both paths looked identical, covered in dead leaves and pine needles. But Lucas knelt, hovering his hand over the left path without touching it. "He stopped here," Lucas murmured. Sofia was breathing hard, her chest heaving as she tried to stifle her sobs. "Como você sabe?" "How you know?" "See this leaf?" Lucas pointed to a maple leaf that was overturned. "It's wet on the underside. That means it was flipped recently. And look at the fern." He traced a broken stem that was bent backward against the natural grain. He hesitated. He was deciding which way to go. Lucas stood up and looked toward the west. The terrain sloped downward there, leading into a dense thicket of rhododendrons. "He went left," Lucas said, his voice tightening. "Is that bad?" Sofia asked, sensing his tension. "The river is that way," Lucas said, and for the first time, fear crept into his tone. "The Blackwood River. If he crosses the ridge and gets into that water, the current will wash away the scent. The dogs won't find him. I won't find him. The trail ends at the water." The realization hit Sofia harder than the cold wind. The river wasn't just geography. It was an eraser. "Run," she whispered. "Nos temos que correr." We run. They moved faster now. Lucas abandoned caution for speed, trusting his reflexes to keep them upright. But the woods fought back. Briars tore at their clothes. Hidden roots tried to trip them. Suddenly, Lucas stopped so abruptly that Sofia nearly crashed into his back. He stood perfectly still, looking back the way they came, toward the town. Through the trees, the faint glow of the festival was still visible, a tiny island of safety in a sea of danger. For a split second, Lucas hesitated. The image of Lily flashed in his mind. He saw her as she had been an hour earlier. Sticky fingers from funnel cake, laughing, completely unaware of how fragile her world really was. She was safe at Mrs. Higgins's house, probably drinking cocoa, waiting for him. But what if something happened to him out here? What if this man had a gun? Lucas was a single father. He was Lily's entire world. Is it right? The doubt gnawed at him. Is it right to risk my daughter's future for a stranger? Then he looked at Sofia. She wasn't looking at the town. She was staring into the dark abyss of the forest, her body trembling not from cold, but from the agony of separation. Lucas knew that look. He had worn it the night his wife died. He pushed the doubt down, locking it away in the back of his mind. He turned back to the dark path. "He's carrying her," Lucas said, refocusing on the tracks to distract himself from the danger. "Look at the depth of the heel print. He's heavy, burdened. That slows him down. It buys us time." He checked his watch. 2 hours remaining. The wind gusted, cold and biting. A drop of rain hit Lucas's cheek. He cursed under his breath. The storm wasn't waiting. The invisible clock ticking in his head seemed to speed up. "We have to beat the rain," Lucas said, grabbing Sofia's hand. It was a tactical necessity now. "If the sky opens up before we find them, the river won't matter. The rain will wash everything away." They scrambled down a rocky incline. Sofia slipped, sliding 10 feet before Lucas caught her arm, hauling her up with a grunt of effort. She was exhausted, her flat shoes useless on the slick terrain, but she didn't complain. "Por qué?" she whispered, looking at this American stranger, searching for the words. Why you help? Everybody, look at me. Lixo, trash. But you look me like person." Lucas paused, steadying her against a tree. "My wife," Lucas said, his voice rough. "Mariana. She was like you. She came here with nothing. She worked hard. She tried to speak English perfect, but people still treated her like she was stupid because of her accent." Sofia listened, mesmerized. "She died 3 years ago," Lucas continued, staring into the darkening woods. "Car accident. The other driver was drunk. But you know what hurt the most? The paramedics told me she was trying to tell them something before she passed, but they couldn't understand her. They said she was babbling. She wasn't babbling. She was praying. She died not being understood." Lucas looked at Sofia, his eyes fierce. "I couldn't help her then. I couldn't be there to translate. So today I am not letting that happen again. Not to you. Not to your little girl." Sofia squeezed his hand. A silent pact was sealed in that dark forest. They weren't strangers anymore. They were allies in a war against time. Suddenly, Lucas stopped dead in his tracks. He crouched low, signaling Sofia to get down. About 50 yards ahead, through the dense underbrush, something bright pink caught the fading light. Lucas crept forward, silent as a ghost. He reached into a thorny bush and pulled it out. It was a plastic hair clip, a cheap pink butterfly. Sofia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. She nodded frantically. It was Ilara's. Lucas gripped the hair clip. It wasn't just dropped. It was high up on the bush. She had dropped it on purpose? Or it had been snagged during a struggle. "We are close," Lucas whispered. Very close. But he didn't go to the river. He turned. Lucas looked up toward the ridgeline. "He's heading for the high ground. I have a serious question for you." Lucas is a single father. He has a little girl waiting for him at home. Is he right to risk his own life for a stranger's child, knowing he might leave his own daughter an orphan? Or should he have stayed safe for Lily's sake, even knowing that he has the skills to help? It's not an easy choice. What would you do? Let me know below. The sky finally broke open. It started as a drizzle, then quickly escalated into a cold, driving rain. The temperature plummeted. In the woods, rain is loud. It hammers against the leaves, drowning out the sound of footsteps. It turns the ground into a slide. "The tracks!" Sofia cried, pointing at the mud. The distinct boot prints were already softening, the edges melting away into brown sludge. "I see them!" Lucas yelled over the wind. "I have the line! Keep moving!" Suddenly, Sofia gasped and stopped, grabbing Lucas's arm with a grip that bruised. She pointed ahead, into a dense thicket of briars about 30 yards away. "Lá! É ela! É o casaco dela! There! It's her! It's her coat!" Lucas squinted through the rain. A patch of bright pink was visible deep in the thorns. It was small, low to the ground, huddled against a tree trunk. It looked exactly like a small child curling up for warmth. "Ilara!" Sofia screamed, breaking from Lucas and sprinting toward the shape. "Sofia, wait!" Lucas yelled, but she was already gone, tearing through the thorns that ripped at her legs. She reached the pink shape and fell to her knees, reaching out to embrace her daughter. But her hands grabbed only cold, wet fabric. It wasn't Ilara. It was a discarded backpack, a child's pink backpack with a cartoon character on it. The predator had thrown it away to lighten his load. Sofia let out a wail of despair that merged with the sound of the wind. She clutched the empty backpack to her chest, rocking back and forth in the mud. The hope had lifted her up only to smash her down harder. Lucas caught up to her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He knelt and touched the backpack. The straps were dry on the underside. "He just threw this," Lucas said, his voice urgent. "Sofia, listen to me. This is good. It means he is getting tired. He is shedding weight because he can't carry her anymore. We are running him down." He pulled her up. "He didn't go to the river. He turned uphill. He's heading for the ridge." "Why?" Sofia choked out. "Because there's an old logging cabin up there," Lucas said, wiping rain from his eyes. "It's the only shelter for miles. If I was a wolf, that's where I'd take the lamb." They hit the base of the ridge. It was steep, slick with mud. Lucas practically dragged Sofia up the slope. His lungs burned, his legs screamed. But the image of his own daughter Lily, safe at Mrs. Higgins' house, flashed in his mind. What if it was Lily? What if she was the one in the rain? That thought gave him a burst of terrifying energy. They crested the ridge, and there it was, the old logging cabin. It was little more than a rotting husk of timber and tin, leaning precariously to one side. A faint, flickering light, maybe a flashlight or a lantern, was visible through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. Lucas pulled Sofia behind a large oak tree. He was panting, soaking wet, his knuckles white around the handle of his flashlight. "He's inside," Lucas whispered. "Ilara!" Sofia whimpered, starting to move forward. Lucas grabbed her shoulder, hard. "No. Listen to me. If we rush in screaming, he might hurt her before we can reach him. He might have a weapon. You have to trust me one more time." He pulled the coil of yellow tow rope from his belt loop. He handed his heavy flashlight to Sofia. "I'm going to circle around the back. There's a hole in the foundation. I used to play here as a kid. I can get in without him hearing." Sofia looked at him, eyes wild with fear. Okay, Ofaso. What I do? Count to 100, Lucas said. Then, I want you to shine this light through the front window and scream. Scream as loud as you can. Make him look at you. Make him forget about the girl. Sofia nodded, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. Sim, I scream. I scream loud. Good. And when he turns to look at you, Lucas's face darkened, the kindness gone, replaced by the cold resolve of the hunter. I will be waiting. Lucas disappeared into the rain, moving silently toward the dark side of the cabin. Sofia stood alone in the storm. She gripped the heavy flashlight like a weapon. She began to count. Doors. Trays. She reached the number 10. But then, a sound came from inside the cabin that stopped her heart. A sharp, terrified cry of a child in pain. Sofia didn't make it to 100. She didn't make it to 20. The mother in her took over. Logic vanished. She clicked the flashlight on, aimed the beam at the shattered front window, and let out a scream that tore through the storm. Tire as Mausdella! Get your hands off her! Sofia's scream shattered the plan. Lucas was only halfway around the rotting structure, picking his way through a mess of briars, when he heard her voice. He froze. 10 seconds. She had barely counted to 10. He wasn't in position. Inside the cabin, the crying stopped abruptly. Lucas didn't wait. He abandoned stealth. He spun around, his boots tearing up the mud as he sprinted back toward the front of the cabin. At the front, the door was kicked open with a violence that shook the frame. The predator stepped out onto the porch. He was huge, a wall of muscle and bad intentions, but he was swaying slightly. He was panting heavily, winded from the climb and the weight of the child. He saw Sofia, a woman alone, trembling, holding a flashlight. He smiled, a cruel, predatory grin. You came alone? He growled, his voice rasping. Big mistake, lady. He lunged off the porch, closing the distance in 2 massive strides. Sofia tried to back up, but she slipped in the mud. She fell hard, shielding her face. The man raised a heavy fist to strike. Now! But the blow never landed. Lucas hit him like a freight train. He had come out of the darkness at a full sprint, launching himself into the air. He collided with the man's midsection, his shoulder driving into the predator's ribs with the force of a battering ram. The impact sounded like a car crash. Both men flew backward, landing hard in the slush. The predator was bigger, but he was exhausted. The climb carrying the girl had drained him. Lucas, however, was fueled by adrenaline and the conditioning of a man who framed houses for 10 hours a day. The man scrambled to get up, swinging a wild, clumsy fist at Lucas's head. Lucas ducked, the wind of the punch rushing past his ear. He grabbed the man's outstretched arm, using the momentum against him. Lucas stepped in, pivoted, and torqued the arm behind the man's back. The man howled in pain. Let go! I'll kill you! You're not killing anyone, Lucas gritted out. He kicked the man's legs out from under him, driving him face first into the mud. Lucas dropped his knee onto the man's spine, pinning him to the earth. The predator thrashed, spitting dirt, but he had no air left in his lungs to fight back. Stop moving, Lucas commanded, his voice deadly calm, or I will snap it. The man stopped moving, wheezing for breath. Sofia, Lucas yelled. The rope! Sofia scrambled up, grabbing the yellow tow rope. Lucas worked fast, hog-tying the man's hands to his ankles with a complexity of knots that no amateur could undo. Lucas stood up, chest heaving. He pointed to the open door. Get her! Sofia bolted into the cabin. A moment later, she emerged carrying Alara. Alara was shaking and terrified, but unhurt. Her clothes were dirty, her cheeks streaked with tears, nothing more. Sofia was sobbing, burying her face in the girl's hair. Lucas watched them, leaning against the porch railing, the rain washing the mud from his face. For a second, he wasn't in the woods. He was back in that hospital room 3 years ago. But this time, the story had a different ending. Suddenly, beams of light cut through the trees. Police! Drop it! Miller and 2 deputies slid down the ridge, guns drawn. They saw Lucas standing empty-handed. They saw the bound man in the mud. They saw the mother and child. Miller lowered his gun. He looked at the prisoner, then at Lucas. He swallowed hard. You got him, Miller whispered. I thought you were crazy, Lucas. He wasn't crazy, Sofia said, stepping forward. Her English was broken, but her voice was strong. He was a father. The walk back was a blur. Paramedics met them at the trailhead. But the real moment came when Lucas saw a small figure waiting by the police line. "Daddy!" Lily launched herself into his arms. Lucas held her, burying his face in her shoulder. "I'm okay, Lil. I'm okay." "You found her," Lily said, looking at Sofia. Sofia walked over, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Reporters were shouting questions, cameras were flashing, but she ignored them. She took Lucas's hand. "Obrigada," she whispered. "Thank you. You gave me my life back." She turned to the cameras, her eyes blazing. "You listen. You listen to him. Not the accent, not the clothes. You listen to the heart. Because the heart, it speaks the same language." That night, Lucas proved that a true hero isn't defined by a badge, but by the willingness to listen when others turn away. While the crowd saw a crazy foreigner, he heard a mother's pain, a sound that has no accent and needs no translation. We live in a world quick to judge and slow to act, often hiding behind our phones or protocol. But evil doesn't wait for permission, and neither should kindness. If you believe every child deserves a protector like Lucas, please share this video. And tell us in the comments, have you ever helped a stranger when no one else would? We want to hear your story. Let me know you've reached the end by writing the word protection in the comments. Thank you, and see you in the next story.